In the tree-lined alleys of an ancient city, there stood a quiet, three-story building, an unassuming yet proud witness to the passage of time. Within those walls, secrets were hidden not only beneath layers of old paint, but in vows never spoken aloud. This was the place where Harper Wilson rose not just to protect her home, but to affirm an unchanging truth: no one could decide her fate but herself. Today's story is a journey of courage and steadfastness, a symphony of love and betrayal, of silent dreams and voices long buried. Let me take you through every shadowed corner, every quiet but determined step where a woman dared to turn pain into strength and reclaim herself amid the surging tides of destiny. Harper Wilson stood in her sunlit kitchen, her hand gently running over the oak countertop she and Grandma Lillian used to scrub to a gleaming shine every weekend. The crisp white curtains billowed softly in the morning breeze, but inside her heart was in turmoil, as if a storm was about to break loose. Footsteps echoed from the hallway behind her, slow and deliberate, heralding the arrival of her mother, Charlotte Wilson, a woman who always carried an air of elegance but was as cold as marble. Harper lifted her head, her gaze resolute as she met her mother's eyes, but her heart tightened when she realized that Charlotte's smile today held no warmth at all. "You have 30 days to move out." Charlotte said her words like a sentence handed down her slender fingers, tapping lightly on the countertop as if it was still her kitchen, and not the place where Harper had made countless family meals, where she had cared for Grandma Lillian with a love that nothing could shake. Harper stood frozen, her lips parted but no words coming out. In her mind, memories of cozy evenings rose up: Grandma Lillian sitting at the table sharing childhood stories, Harper patiently kneading bread dough, her hands sometimes trembling with nerves, but never once giving up. All of that was now swept away by Charlotte's dismissive decree. Ethan, her brother, walked in, his arm around Ava, his pregnant wife. "You hardly use this apartment anyway, right?" Harper Ethan said, his tone trying to sound friendly, but his eyes gave away the coldness underneath. "Ava needs a safe space to prepare for the baby." Harper looked into Ava's wide eyes and saw the unease hiding behind her forced smile. But she didn't blame Ava. The woman seemed like just another pawn in this family game, pushed forward as a shield for Ethan and Charlotte's ambitions. Harper drew in a deep breath, her shoulders trembling, not from fear, but from the pain of betrayal by those who shared her blood. Charlotte didn't give Harper a chance to protest. She placed a cream-colored folder on the counter, the papers inside stacked neatly like undeniable proof. "We've finalized everything," she said in a voice as sweet as honey but as cold as ice. "Ethan and Ava will have full rights to this apartment starting next month." Harper stood her ground, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the mother who had always seen her as a shadow at the edge of the family. The years she had spent caring for her grandmother, turning this apartment into a true home, were now reduced to just a procedure in her mother's eyes. Ava squeezed Ethan's hand, giving a slight nod, as if she hoped Harper would accept this arrangement quietly, without complaint. But deep down, Harper knew she was no longer the obedient child she used to be. As Charlotte left the kitchen, Harper caught a fleeting look of triumph in her eyes, one she would never forget. Ethan placed a hand on Ava's shoulder, his eyes avoiding his sister's. "You know it's for the best," he whispered, as if those words could soften the pain he was helping to cause. Harper didn't answer. In the deafening silence that followed, she could only hear the pounding of her own heart, like a drumbeat warning of the storm that was about to erupt. Her fingers brushed over a small crack in the countertop, a crack that had been there since Grandma Lillian's time, a scar of love and time that Charlotte would never understand. In that moment, Harper realized she wasn't just losing an apartment, she was losing a piece of herself. But deep down, she knew she couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't leave this home quietly. She wouldn't let silence be the last word. Harper sat quietly in the living room after Charlotte and Ethan left, the light from the large window casting shadows on her face, reflections in the mirror on the wall, flickering with the same turmoil that filled her mind. She didn't cry. didn't scream, just felt a cold emptiness opening inside her chest, a void that only those who have been betrayed by their own family could ever truly understand. The scent of the cookies she and Grandma Lillian used to bake still lingered in the air, a stubborn reminder of the sweet evenings spent in this very kitchen. Harper closed her eyes, trying to bring back the image of her grandmother. Kind eyes, wrinkled hands, always warm when they held her own, and a calm voice that rose whenever she felt worried. Always remember, Harper, love is the most precious thing, but sometimes you have to learn to love yourself first. But to love yourself, Harper told herself, did it mean to just stand by and let her mother and brother's injustice go unchallenged? She remembered every long night working tirelessly every early morning, baking for family gatherings where Charlotte always took credit for what Harper had done. She remembered the late nights when Ethan was consumed by failing business ventures, and she stayed behind quietly caring for Grandma Lillian as her health declined. So much sacrifice, so much love, and now it had all been swept away by those cold words. You have 30 days to move out. For a moment, Harper felt like a ghost adrift in the house she had poured her sweat and tears into, turning it into a true home. But then she remembered Grandma Lillian's words about the sealed envelope she had pressed into her hands one late afternoon bathed in golden light. Keep this, Harper. Not everyone deserves to know the truth. But one day you will need it. Harper took a deep breath, her anger slowly hardening into a quiet, burning resolve. She stood up, moving up the worn staircase to her study, her palm brushing over each faded baluster. Every step was a statement she would not let Charlotte and Ethan decide her fate. Harper's study was as simple as always: a sturdy oak desk, an old upholstered chair, and bookshelves filled with cookbooks and Lillian's favorite novels. In the corner, the small drawer where she had carefully hidden the envelope still waited, trembling slightly whenever the wind swept through the window. Harper opened the drawer, her hands trembling a little but her eyes no longer afraid. The envelope was still intact, its pale yellow color glinting like a faint beacon of hope in the dark fog of betrayal. She knew that what was inside was more than just paper. It was a spiritual inheritance, the unwavering trust her grandmother had placed in her. And Harper understood the time to open that envelope had come. She would no longer be the obedient doll her mother and brother wanted her to be. She would be the one to tell her own story, refusing to let anyone else define it. Because this apartment, this building, and all the beautiful memories within these were Harper's, and she would not let go. Harper sat at her desk, her hand gently tracing the edge of the envelope, as if she were searching for the lingering warmth of Grandma Lillian's touch. Outside, the city was still busy with car horns, hurried footsteps, and the breathless rhythm of people who had no idea that inside this room a secret was about to be revealed, a secret that could change everything Charlotte and Ethan were scheming. Harper slowly opened the envelope, the soft rustle of paper sounding loud in the quiet room, so loud she could hear her own heartbeat. Inside the papers were neatly stacked, each word written with careful, steady strokes that reflected Grandma Lillian's unwavering resolve. Harper's eyes scanned each line, her breath catching as she realized this wasn't just a deed to the apartment. It was the entire building, the whole space she and her grandmother had poured their love into. Every legal document, every signature, all properly notarized in her name, Harper Wilson, with no room for Charlotte or Ethan to stake a claim. Harper smiled a soft smile that ran deep. It wasn't a smile of triumph, it was gratitude for the grandmother who had seen her worth even when her family tried to deny it. Harper wasn't a fragile girl being pushed out of her own home. She was the heir not just to property, but to the memories, the kindness, and the quiet strength of a woman who had loved her more than anyone else. Setting the papers down on the desk, Harper stood, her shoulders suddenly feeling straighter, her gaze lit with a confidence she had never known before. She didn't need to shout to be heard. Now these papers would speak the truth for her. She walked down the stairs, each step sure and steady, carrying a resolve that could not be shaken. In the living room, Charlotte sat in a velvet armchair, her legs crossed, and her gaze still imperious like a queen. Ethan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, eyes shifting sideways as if to avoid the storm he had helped to create. Harper didn't rush. She placed the stack of documents down on the coffee table, letting the soft thud echo clearly, a declaration that needed no words. Charlotte looked up, a flicker of unease in her eyes at the calm expression on Harper's face, the calm that told her every scheme she had built was about to collapse. "This," Harper said, her voice low but resolute, "is the truth you tried to hide. This entire building, every brick, every window is mine. It's the legacy Grandma Lillian left to me. It's not something you or Ethan can sell off like a cheap piece of merchandise." The room fell silent. Charlotte's fingers tightened around the arm of the chair while Ethan swallowed hard, his throat working as if he didn't know how to respond. Harper kept her gaze steady. She was no longer afraid of losing the apartment because she knew that she had found her own voice again. And with that voice, she would never let anyone take away what was most sacred, the space where beautiful memories and the quiet courage of a true family would live on forever. Charlotte sat in silence, her lips pressed into a thin, calculating line, her gaze no longer carrying the certainty that had once made Harper shrink whenever they faced each other. Ethan stood beside her, his hand clenched into a fist but saying nothing, while Ava, his young wife, sat curled in the corner of the couch, her hand resting on her belly in an instinctive gesture of protection. The living room, once the heart of family gatherings, had now become a silent battlefield. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the window, casting patterns of light and shadow on the carpet, mirroring the tangle of emotions roiling within each of them. Harper stood there, her slender frame no longer carrying the frailty that Charlotte had always expected to dominate. In Harper's hand was a slim folder that carried the weight of an entire legacy, not just papers with Grandma Lillian's signature, but the trust, the recognition, and the faith she had bestowed upon her. "I don't want to turn this place into a battlefield," Harper said, her voice calm but unwavering, as if every word had been chosen with the care of her own heart. "But I won't let you or anyone else take away what Grandma left for me." Each word reverberated off the old oak walls, tightening the room around them. Charlotte blinked, her hands trembling slightly as if she wanted to protest, but couldn't find the words. Ethan exhaled heavily, his shoulders sagging as he realized there was no longer room for lies. Ava lifted her head, her gaze meeting Harper's, no longer holding fear, but instead a quiet gratitude. Harper saw that, and in that moment she understood that Ava was just another woman trying to protect the child she was about to bring into the world. Nothing more. Nothing less. Harper turned to Ava, her voice softening. "If you need a safe place to raise your baby, there's an empty apartment on the 3rd floor. But it will be a fair agreement between you and me. Nothing to do with this family's schemes." Ava gave a small nod, her eyes shimmering with tears she hadn't yet let fall. Charlotte rose to her feet, still carrying the aura of authority, but this time Harper could see the uncertainty flickering beneath that strong exterior. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and tired, like a shadow of the woman she had always tried to be. But Harper just smiled faintly, a smile of quiet confidence and peace. "Maybe," she replied, "but I will never regret standing up for what's right or for myself." Harper's words fell like a final period, ending the hidden machinations and marking the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter she would write with her own strength, her resolute heart, and her unwavering loyalty. And in that moment, Harper knew she was no longer the passive girl at the mercy of her family's designs. She had become the one who would decide the fate of her own life. Night fell, and the streetlights outside the window cast thin yellow streaks across the walls, but in Harper's heart, everything had become brighter than ever. She sat alone in the familiar kitchen, the place that had witnessed so many stories of the 3 generations of Wilson women. Memories rushed back, like a slow-motion film, images of Grandma Lillian smiling warmly by the oven, her thin hands deftly kneading dough. Late nights when Harper stayed up all night preparing dishes for clients while Charlotte always stood there with a distant look and polite compliments that never rang true. Harper realized it was time for her to no longer hide behind the shell of the dutiful daughter. She wouldn't let Charlotte turn all her efforts into a duty of a child, nor let Ethan use family promises to cover his selfish ambitions. The phone rang, tearing through the quiet. Harper looked at the screen, seeing the name of her father, Walter Wilson, appear like a final challenge she was ready to face. His voice was hoarse, still carrying the tone of someone who always believed that blood ties were unbreakable. Harper, your mother is very upset. Do you really want to push things this far? Family is family, my dear. Harper listened without feeling the slightest softness. I understand, Dad, she replied, her voice low but resolute. But family doesn't mean I have to stay silent when I'm treated unfairly. I don't want to divide us, but I won't let myself be buried under unreasonable demands anymore. On the other end of the line, there was a long pause, as if Walter too could feel the unwavering resolve in her words. Finally, he just sighed, saying nothing more. Harper set the phone down, her heart filled with a strange calm. She had spent her entire youth trying to please everyone, to never become a burden or a troublemaker in Charlotte's eyes. But now, as she looked back at it all, she realized the only thing truly worth holding on to was herself, and the legacy Grandma Lillian had trusted her with. Harper stood up, walking slowly through each corner of the house, her hand gently brushing over the window frames, the kitchen cabinets, the tiled floor. Everything had absorbed the sweat and love of her and Grandma Lillian. This wasn't just an apartment, it was a witness to Harper's journey of growing up, a journey she wouldn't let anyone snuff out. When she paused at the staircase leading to the third floor, the place she had offered to Ava, Harper suddenly smiled, a real smile, free of bitterness or fear. She knew that tomorrow everything would begin to change, but this time she would be the one holding the pen to write her story. No one else would be able to take that from her again. The next morning, the first rays of the new day streamed through the curtains, casting warm golden patches of light on the floor. Harper woke up in the quiet, feeling as if the entire space shared with her a quiet yet unyielding resolve. She brewed a cup of hot tea, the scent of peppermint leaves wafting through the kitchen, a gentle reminder of the peaceful mornings Grandma Lillian used to create just for the two of them. Each sip of tea warmed her chest, dissolving all the anxious nights. Harper knew that today was not just another day. Today she would gather the shards of trust that her mother and brother had tarnished and turn them into the foundation of a new life. The doorbell rang, cutting into her thoughts. Ava stood there holding a bag of still warm pastries from the corner bakery, a small but sincere gesture. Her eyes were a little hesitant, but Harper could see the determination and gratitude shining through. I wanted to thank you, Ava said softly, her voice trembling just a bit. I know this isn't easy for you, but I'm truly grateful that you gave me a separate path, a chance to start over without being caught in the family's games. Harper simply nodded, offering a gentle smile. Don't worry. As long as you and the baby can live in peace and freedom, I won't let anyone force or manipulate you anymore. In that moment, the two women, two sisters-in-law with different fates, felt an invisible thread connect them, the shared desire to take charge of their own lives. Harper led Ava up to the third floor, the apartment she had planned to renovate. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating every empty corner of the room. The wooden floor gleamed, the fresh white walls stood ready, everything waiting for a new beginning. Ava walked slowly through each room, her hand gently brushing the wooden countertop that still smelled of newness. It's really beautiful, Ava whispered, her eyes shimmering with hope. I'm going to make it a home, a real one. Harper placed a hand on Ava's shoulder, giving it a small, encouraging squeeze. I know you will. When Ava left, Harper stood in the doorway, watching her sister-in-law's figure disappear down the stairs. In her heart, A peaceful feeling spread not because everything was over, but because she had chosen to stand on the side of what was right to stand, with those who wanted to write the next chapter of their lives for themselves. Harper turned back into her apartment, taking a deep breath. The scent of peppermint tea still lingered, and in the morning's quiet she realized she was no longer alone. She had become a protector, a guardian, not just for herself, but for the small, brave dreams of those around her. And that, she thought, was the most precious legacy Grandma Lillian had ever given her: the courage to never bow to anyone. The weekend arrived, and the atmosphere within the family was like a tense background melody that only those involved could truly hear. Harper received a message from Charlotte. "This afternoon, the family will meet at your old house. We need to have a final conversation." Though the message maintained Charlotte's usual polite tone, Harper knew all too well this was no longer a conversation. It was the final act of a performance by those who had always believed they could control her life. She sat quietly in the kitchen, breathing in the lingering scent of peppermint tea, then stood up, slipping into the gray wool cardigan Grandma Lillian had knitted for her years ago. Her eyes shone with an unyielding resolve, each step heavy but sure, like the steady rhythm of a determined heart. Charlotte and Walter's old house still stood proud like a small castle, its red brick walls draped in ivy. When Harper walked in, she saw Ethan standing with his arms crossed by the fireplace, his narrowed eyes betraying a hint of unease. Ava sat in the armchair, her hands on her belly, her gaze quiet but strong. Charlotte, in a classic gray dress, sat upright at the head of the table, her gaze as sharp as a blade. "Harper," she began, her voice still carrying that outward confidence Harper had grown so used to. "I have thought about this a lot. Everything can be settled peacefully, if you're willing to give up what was never yours to begin with." Harper smiled faintly, no fear in her smile now. "Mother, the only thing I have given up all these years has been my own freedom and peace of mind, but that time is over." She placed a copy of the legal papers on the table, the sound of the paper meeting the wood like a statement that could not be denied. "It's all clear now that building that apartment, it's mine. It's not a gift to be bartered away, not a debt for you to tally up on paper. It's Grandma Lillian's legacy, not just in documents, but in every ounce of love and trust she gave me." Ethan's eyes flickered to Ava, a flicker of uncertainty passing across his face. As for Charlotte, she stayed silent, but the hand resting on the chair's armrest had tightened until her knuckles were white. "You're making a huge mistake, Harper," she said, her voice shaking, whether from anger or fear it was hard to tell. But Harper just tilted her head, her gaze calm and clear. "No, Mother. I'm fixing a mistake, the mistake of people who forgot that greed has no place in a true home." The room fell into silence, a heavy but clean silence, like a summer rain washing away the dust of lies. In Harper's heart, she knew this wasn't just a victory for herself. It was a reminder that no one had the right to decide her fate but her. Harper left the old house, the wooden door slamming shut behind her like the final lock sealing away a past full of manipulation and suffocation. She stepped outside, the late autumn air carrying a hint of chill, but inside Harper a strange warmth was rising, the warmth of the freedom she had finally claimed back for herself. As she walked back to her own building, the streetlights had just turned on, casting shimmering ribbons of light across the facade. Harper walked slowly, her hand brushing the weathered iron railing, remembering the nights she and Grandma Lillian had sat there sharing small stories that contained whole worlds. This building wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was a part of her very being, a part of memory and love that no one could ever erase. In the kitchen, the scent of peppermint still lingered, but now it was no longer the smell of memories. It was the smell of a beginning. Harper looked around the room. Every object, every crack in the wall, everything was telling a new story, a story no longer twisted by Charlotte or manipulated by Ethan. She knew there would still be challenges, still days when loneliness would wash over her like a sudden night rain. But Harper also knew she had chosen to walk through those storms, carrying the belief that what she held on to wasn't just ownership, it was the right to live life on her own terms. The phone rang, cutting through Harper's thoughts. Ava was calling, her voice a little shaky but full of resolve. "I've signed the lease, Harper. I'm going to make that apartment a safe place for my child, and no one can interfere anymore." Harper smiled, answering softly, "I believe in you, Ava. And don't forget, this isn't just a place to live. It's your chance to start over and to prove to yourself that you're stronger than you ever imagined." When the call ended, Harper stood up, filling the kettle with fresh water for mint tea, breathing in the crisp, clean scent, and feeling a rare sense of contentment rise inside her. Outside, the city lights sparkled like 1,000 stars, and Harper knew this was only the beginning. She had chosen her path, had defined the worth no one would ever be allowed to take from her. Tomorrow would come perhaps with new trials, but Harper had learned how to stand firm, had learned that silence didn't mean surrender, and that she had the right to decide everything that touched her life. That night, as she stood by the large window looking down at the dazzling street, Harper saw a version of herself reflected in the glass, strong, calm, and confident. And she knew somewhere in the breeze, in the city's twinkling lights, and in Harper's own heart that now felt strong enough to protect all that was hers, Grandma Lillian was smiling with her. The next morning, the light of dawn spread across the glass windows of the building that Harper had protected with all her love and determination. She sat at her desk, a cup of peppermint tea still steaming its gentle fragrance like a silent companion. Harper leafed through new contracts plans to renovate the basement into a community room where young people could find opportunities, find a place to steady themselves as they built their dreams. In her mind, every word Grandma Lillian had ever spoken still echoed like a quiet reminder. Make this a refuge for souls that need healing. Don't let it be just a house without warmth. Harper understood that this was no longer a battle for an apartment. This was a journey to affirm herself, to prove that love and steadfastness could turn any place into a home. She had done it not by shouting or fighting, but by quietly proving that sincerity and courage would always overcome the most cunning schemes. Outside the window, the footsteps of the building's residents echoed back, children's voices chirping as they played on the sidewalk, and Harper knew those sounds were living proof that this place, though some had tried to turn it into a commodity, had always been a space for kindness and sharing to grow. When she put pen to paper on a new contract, the first one she had signed since she formally asserted her ownership, Harper felt her hands no longer trembled as they once did. Each stroke of black ink on white paper was a mark of herself, a declaration to the world. This was the new chapter of Harper Wilson's life. A chapter she would write with passion, with dedication, and with the profound gratitude for the grandmother who had taught her that nothing was more precious than the right to control her own destiny. Outside, the early sunlight shone on the facade of the building, making the windows sparkle like jewels. Harper smiled softly, a smile of pride and the calm that she had fought all her life to reach. And in that moment, she knew that no matter how many challenges lay ahead, she would never lose the courage and faith in herself, the most beautiful legacy Harper Wilson had and would cherish forever. As the final rays of the day faded from the face of the old building, Harper Wilson stood there, peaceful and proud. She had learned how to stand up for herself, and more than that, how to turn the wreckage into a solid foundation to begin a new chapter. Harper's story was not just a fight for a home, it was a journey to reclaim her voice and the right to choose a right that everyone deserves. If you see a part of yourself in her journey, please share this video so Harper's story can become an inspiration to anyone searching for the strength to stand up and claim their worth. Hit follow to never miss the next stories of courage, determination, and the beautiful legacies we're building together.